The universe didn't begin with a bang. It began with a violent, lonely thought inside an endless black ocean. Before light, before time, before the very concept of existence, there was only the none, a churning, chaotic abyss of primordial water. And in this terrifying emptiness, a single consciousness awakened. It had no name, no form, no past. It was simply aware. And from this awareness came a desperate, cosmic urge to exist. This first act of creation wasn't gentle. It was a spasm, a tearing of reality itself. But this new universe, born from a single desperate thought, contained a fatal flaw. A secret so dark it would eventually lead to the murder of a god, and a war that would scar the heavens for eternity. So what was it? What was the original sin hardwired into the fabric of Egyptian creation? An error that guaranteed its paradise would inevitably fall. To understand the crime, you have to understand the creation. Imagine absolute nothingness. Not the blackness of space between stars, but a true void. A pressure-filled, silent, watery chaos. This was the none. It had no beginning and no end. It was the potential for everything and the reality of nothing. For an eternity it was all there was. Until it wasn't. From this primordial sludge, a single point of will emerged. A thought that refused to be nothing. This being, who would later be called Atum, willed himself into existence. He was the first. The ultimate self-made man, or rather self-made god. He rose from the chaos on the first patch of dry land ever to exist, a solitary mound called the Benben. Picture it. One god on one hill in an infinite dark ocean. The scale of this loneliness is almost impossible to comprehend. He was the sum total of all existence. Atum was complete in himself, both male and female. He was the great he-she. But to be the only thing in existence is a kind of prison. What is the point of consciousness with nothing to be conscious of? What is the point of power with nothing to shape? The silence of the void was deafening. And so, in this profound isolation, Atum performed the first act of creation. An act that was both miraculous and disturbingly personal. He joined with his own shadow. In an act of divine masturbation, he took his own essence into his mouth, and from this union, he expelled the first divine pair. This wasn't a clean, majestic birth. The ancient texts are explicit. He either spat or sneezed them out. With a single violent convulsion, he brought forth his son and daughter. The first was Shu. He was the air, the principle of dryness, the very breath of life. A gust of wind that pushed back the suffocating waters of the Nun for the first time. The second was Tefnut. She was moisture, the dew, the rain, the fine mist that brings life to the desert. She was the binding agent of the cosmos. Together, they were the fundamental principles of a structured world. Air and water, the first separation of elements from the unified chaos. For a moment there was potential. There was family. Atum was no longer alone. He had children. He had created life from his own substance, a part of himself now separate with its own will. He had brought order to the chaos. But the Nun was not so easily tamed. The primordial abyss was still all around them, a dark, hungry ocean waiting to reclaim all that had been taken from it. And in the infinite blackness, Atum's children, the very first life in the universe, were lost. Shu and Tefnut, the god of air and the goddess of moisture, wandered away from the safety of the Benben mound and were swallowed by the endless, swirling darkness of the Nun. They vanished. One moment, Atum was a father, the creator of a new order. The next, he was alone again, his creation a failure, his children consumed by the very chaos he had sought to conquer. Imagine the terror. The first father, having just created life, now faced the first loss. The silence he had tried to fill came rushing back, heavier and more menacing than before. Was this it? Was creation just a fleeting dream? A brief flicker of light destined to be extinguished by the overwhelming darkness? For an age, Atum sat on his lonely hill, blind in the dark, calling out for his children with a voice that had no air to carry it. His despair was absolute. The universe had barely begun, and it was already over. But Atum was not just a father. He was the source of all power. He would not accept this failure. He would not let the Nun win. To find his lost children, he did something extraordinary. He reached into himself and took a piece of his own being, a part of his very consciousness, and gave it form. He plucked out his own eye. This wasn't just an organ of sight. This was the eye of Atum, an entity in its own right, a vessel of his divine power and will. Later, it would become synonymous with the fearsome eye of Ra, a symbol of royal authority, protection, and unimaginable fury. He gave it a single desperate command: "Go into the infinite darkness and bring back my children." The eye, a blazing beacon of divine light, detached from its creator and plunged into the chaotic waters of the Nun. It was the first star in a starless universe, a searchlight cutting through the absolute black. For what felt like another eternity, Atum waited. He sat on his mound, now physically incomplete, having sacrificed a part of himself for the hope of reclaiming his family. He was wounded, vulnerable, and utterly alone, waiting in the dark for a sign that his gamble had paid off. And then he saw it. A distant light, returning from the depths. The eye had succeeded. It emerged from the waters of Nun with his children, Shu and Tefnut, safe and sound. The relief, the joy Atum felt was so overwhelming, so powerful, that for the first time he wept. And where his tears struck the dark soil of the Benben mound, something new sprang into life. From the tears of a joyful god, the first human beings were born. In one moment, the family of gods was reunited, and a new mortal race was created out of pure divine emotion. It was a perfect moment, a triumph of order over chaos, of love over despair. The universe was back on track. Atum embraced his children, his eye returned to him, and humanity took its first breath on the primordial hill. But this is where the story turns. This is the moment the fatal flaw, the original sin, is revealed. Because while his first eye was gone, lost in the abyss on its desperate search, the profound loneliness and fear had driven Atum to do something unthinkable. He couldn't bear the darkness, the emptiness of his own face. And so, while his original eye was away, he had grown another one, a replacement, a brighter, more powerful eye to take its place. When the original eye returned triumphant, having saved creation itself, it came back to find it had been replaced. Its place in the heavens, its position of honor at the center of its creator's face, was gone. It had been made obsolete. The rage, the betrayal, the cosmic fury felt by that first eye was immeasurable. It had braved the ultimate darkness for its creator, only to be cast aside. Atum, realizing his grave error, tried to placate the enraged eye. He knew its power. He knew the fury he had unleashed, so he gave it a new, exalted position. He placed it on his brow, transforming it into the uraeus, the coiled cobra we see on the headdresses of the pharaohs. He declared that it would be the protector of the gods, the agent of his wrath, a power that all would fear and respect. But the damage was done. The very first act of loyalty in the new universe had been met with an act of betrayal. A seed of resentment and violence was planted at the heart of the divine family. The first hero had been turned into the first villain. And this enraged, rejected eye would not forget. Its anger would fester, poisoning the perfect creation, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to jealousy, murder, and a celestial war from which the gods themselves would never fully recover. The paradise Atum had tried to build was now and forever compromised. From the cosmic union of Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, came the next generation of divine power, the four children who would define the fate of all creation. They were not just gods. They were the archetypes of existence itself, the very forces that would govern the world of mortals. The first to be born was Osiris, and with his first breath, order came into the world. He was the embodiment of stability, the spirit of civilization. Where there was chaos, he brought law. Where there was barren land, he brought agriculture. He was the benevolent king, the wise teacher, the very essence of life and righteous rule. He taught the newly formed humans how to plant wheat and barley, how to press grapes into wine, how to honor the gods. Under his guidance, the black, fertile soil of the Nile Valley bloomed, and humanity thrived. He was loved, not just respected. He was adored. His sister born next was Isis, a goddess of unparalleled wisdom and immense magical power. She was the perfect queen to his king, his confidant, his partner, and his wife. Her loyalty was as deep as the primordial ocean, her intelligence as bright as the sun. She was the divine mother, the protector of the throne, the weaver of fate. Together, Osiris and Isis represented the perfect harmony, a world in balance, a golden age where gods and mortals lived in prosperity. But the sky goddess Nut was destined to bear 4 children, and the third to arrive was not born into light, but tore himself violently from his mother's womb, a bloody and premature birth that heralded his very nature. This was Set. Where Osiris was the fertile black land, Set was the red, barren desert that surrounded it. He was the god of chaos, the lord of violent storms, the spirit of envy and rage. He embodied everything that was untamable, unpredictable, and destructive. While Osiris built, Set sought to tear down. While Osiris nurtured, Set sought to destroy. He watched from the desolate wastes as his brother received the praise of all creation, and in the searing heat of his domain, a cold and bitter jealousy began to fester. The last of the four was Nephthys, a goddess of shadows and the unseen. She was given to Set as his wife, just as Isis was to Osiris, in an attempt to create balance. But where Osiris and Isis were a perfect union, Set and Nephthys were a study in discord. She was a quiet, enigmatic presence, forever caught in the shadow of her more luminous siblings, her destiny inextricably and tragically tied to them all. The world flourished under Osiris. Life was good, predictable, and just. But for every hymn sung in Osiris's name, for every temple built in his honor, Set's hatred grew. Why should his brother, born just moments before him, inherit everything? The throne, the adoration, the fertile world itself? Set saw Osiris not as a benevolent king, but as a tyrant of order, strangling the beautiful wild chaos that Set believed was the true nature of the universe. His jealousy was no longer a quiet resentment. It had become a consuming fire, a meticulous, patient plan for murder. Set knew he could not defeat Osiris in open combat. Osiris was the beloved king, protected by the gods and the love of his people. No, this had to be an act of betrayal, a strike from the shadows, cloaked in the guise of celebration. So Set announced he would host the most magnificent feast the gods had ever seen. He invited everyone, showering them with wine, music, and food. The halls of his palace echoed with laughter and revelry, and at the height of the festivities he unveiled his masterstroke. He presented a chest, a sarcophagus of breathtaking beauty. It was crafted from the finest cedar, inlaid with gold and lapis lazuli, covered in intricate carvings that told the story of the stars. Set, with a magnanimous smile, announced a game. "This chest," he boomed, "is a gift. I will give it to whichever one of you fits inside it most perfectly." The gods, merry with wine and caught up in the fun, thought it a wonderful diversion. One by one they stepped forward to try. The smaller gods rattled around inside. The larger gods couldn't even squeeze their shoulders through. The chest seemed to be made for no one. Then Set turned to his brother Osiris. "Brother," he said, his voice dripping with false affection, "surely you, the most perfect of us all, must try." Isis felt a sudden, cold premonition, a flicker of darkness at the edge of the celebration. She urged her husband not to, but Osiris, noble and trusting, saw no harm in his brother's game. He laughed, reassuring his wife, and stepped toward the chest. He lay down inside it and the gods gasped. It was a perfect fit, not a fraction of an inch to spare. He was framed by the ornate wood like a sleeping king. In that instant the mood shattered. Before Osiris could even move, Set and 72 of his hidden conspirators leaped forward. They slammed the heavy lid shut, the sound echoing like a thunderclap of doom. The laughter died in the throats of the assembled gods, replaced by screams of horror. They hammered nails of lead into the lid, sealing it shut. They poured molten lead over every seam, ensuring not even a breath of air could escape. Inside, the king of life, the god who had brought civilization to the world, was trapped in absolute darkness, suffocating, drowning in the silence of his own tomb. The first murder had been committed. The ultimate taboo had been broken. Set, the god of chaos, lifted the beautiful coffin that had become his brother's prison. He and his followers carried it to the banks of the Nile, the very river that was the source of Osiris's life-giving power, and with a final act of contempt, they hurled it into the water. The chest was swept away by the current, carrying the dead king out towards the great sea. With Osiris gone, a tremor of fear ran through the cosmos. Set seized the throne of Egypt. His reign was a nightmare. The harvests failed. The deserts encroached on the fertile land. Vicious storms tore through the skies. Law was replaced by fear, and order gave way to brutal chaos. The golden age was over, drowned in the Nile with its rightful king. When the news reached Isis, her scream of anguish was said to have shaken the pillars of heaven. It was a sound of pure cosmic grief, the cry of a wife who had lost her husband, a sister who had lost her brother, a queen who had lost her king. The world wept with her. But Isis was not just a grieving widow. She was the goddess of magic. Her sorrow was not a weakness. It was a fire that forged an unbreakable resolve. As her tears fell, they transformed her. The queen was gone. In her place stood a huntress, a seeker. She cast off her royal robes, donning the simple clothes of a mourner, and set out alone. She would not rest. She would not stop. She would walk to the ends of the earth if she had to find the body of her beloved husband and bring him back from the dead. Her desperate, impossible quest had just begun. Isis transformed. The gentle queen, the joyous wife, was gone, burned away by grief and remade into an avatar of singular, unyielding purpose. She wandered the banks of the Nile, her feet raw, her voice hoarse from calling his name into the uncaring wind. She asked the reeds if they had seen him. She asked the crocodiles basking in the mud. She asked the falcons circling in the merciless sun. But the world of nature, once his to command, was now silent. It mourned its king as she did. Her search seemed hopeless. The Nile was a vast, sprawling artery, a liquid continent of endless possibility. A single chest could have gone anywhere. Snagged on a sandbar, sunk into the deep muck, or shattered against rocks, its precious contents lost to the river's creatures forever. Days bled into weeks. Her divine endurance was tested to its absolute limit. Lesser beings would have collapsed, their spirits broken. But Isis was not a lesser being. Her love for Osiris was a fire that consumed all weakness, all despair. It was the only thing she had left. One sweltering afternoon, near the delta where the great river meets the sea, she stumbled upon a group of children playing. They stopped their games, their eyes wide at the sight of this wild, sorrowful woman. Most adults had learned to turn away, uncomfortable in the face of such naked grief. But children see things the world teaches us to ignore. She knelt, her gaze desperate, and asked them the same question she had asked 1,000 times before. Have you seen a beautiful chest, sealed with lead, floating on the water? And for the first time, she did not receive a shake of the head. The children began chattering all at once. Yes, they had seen it. A magnificent box of dark wood, smelling of cedar and strange magic. It had rushed past them days ago, caught in the river's strongest current, heading not inland but out into the great green, the vast, terrifying expanse of the Mediterranean Sea. It was the first glimmer of hope she'd had. A direction, a destination. Set, in his arrogance, had assumed the river would be Osiris's tomb. He never imagined it would become his vessel, carrying him beyond the borders of Egypt itself. Isis did not hesitate. Using her magic, she followed the path the children had described, her senses attuned to the faintest trace of her husband's divine energy. The trail led her across the sea, a lonely figure propelled by love and rage. Her journey ended on a foreign shore, in the Phoenician city of Byblos. Byblos was a bustling port, a city of merchants and sailors, its air thick with the scent of salt, cedarwood, and spices from faraway lands. But Isis had no eye for its wonders. She was a predator on the hunt, and the scent of her prey was growing stronger. The trail led her to the beach, to a spot where one tree stood apart from all the others. It was a tamarisk, but a tamarisk of impossible size and beauty, its fragrance so intoxicating it seemed to be a piece of the heavens fallen to earth. And as she drew closer, she knew. She felt it with every fiber of her being. The chest had washed ashore right here. This magnificent tree had sprouted from the sand and grown around it at a supernatural speed, encasing the coffin of the god in a living tomb of wood and leaves. Her heart both soared and plummeted. He was here. He was near. But he was trapped. And her problem had just become infinitely more complex. The tree's fame had spread throughout the city. The king of Byblos himself, Malkander, had heard tales of the miraculous, fragrant tree. He had ordered it cut down and brought to his palace, not knowing the divine secret it held. The trunk, straight and strong, had been fashioned into the central pillar of his great hall, supporting the entire roof. Osiris was now the literal foundation of a foreign king's power. How could she, a lone wanderer in a strange land, possibly convince a king to tear down his own palace? Direct confrontation was impossible. She needed cunning. She needed to get inside. She shrouded her divinity, transforming her appearance into that of a weary, elderly woman, her back bent with age, her face a mask of quiet sorrow. She went to the city well, the place where the palace servants came to draw water and trade gossip. There she sat in silence, waiting. Soon the handmaidens of Queen Astarte arrived. They were beautiful and vain, laughing and chattering amongst themselves. They paid the old woman no mind, until a strange, beautiful scent wafted towards them. Isis, without a word, had begun to braid their hair, her fingers moving with impossible speed and grace. And as she worked, she breathed the scent of ambrosia, the fragrance of the gods, into their locks. When the handmaidens returned to the palace, Queen Astarte was enchanted by the divine perfume that clung to them. They told her of the mysterious old woman at the well, and the queen, intrigued, commanded that this stranger be brought before her. Isis was led into the great hall, and her heart nearly stopped. There it was, the pillar, majestic, fragrant, and utterly impassable. She could feel Osiris inside, so close, his silent presence calling to her. She forced herself to remain calm, to play her part. Bowing low before the queen, she accepted the position offered to her. Nursemaid to the infant prince of Byblos. She became a model servant. She cared for the baby as if he were her own, and under her watch, the child thrived, growing strong and healthy at an astonishing rate. But Isis had a plan far greater than simply earning the queen's trust. She had grown fond of this mortal child. In her grief, she saw a chance to bestow a gift, to defy the death that had stolen her own love. She would make the prince immortal. Each night, when the palace was asleep, Isis would perform a secret, terrifying ritual. She would bar the doors to the nursery and build a great fire in the hearth. Then she would place the infant prince directly into the cleansing flames. This was the ancient magic, the divine fire that would burn away his mortal flesh, leaving only an eternal, indestructible spirit. While the flames licked at the child, who remained miraculously unharmed, Isis would transform into a swallow, flying endlessly around the pillar, her mournful bird cry the only sound in the silent hall, a goddess circling the tomb of her husband, while trying to grant another the eternity he had lost. But Queen Astarte grew suspicious. Her son was too healthy, too perfect. And what were the strange noises she heard from the nursery late at night? One evening, her curiosity overcame her. She crept to the nursery door and peered through a crack. The sight that met her eyes was a parent's worst nightmare. She saw her baby, her beloved son, lying in a roaring fire. She didn't understand the magic. She didn't see a divine ritual. She saw only flames in her child. A piercing shriek of pure terror ripped from her throat as she burst into the room and snatched the baby from the fire. In that instant, the spell was shattered. The child was safe, but his chance at immortality was gone forever. The swallow transformed, not back into the old woman, but into the radiant, terrifying form of the goddess Isis. Her eyes blazed with fury and sorrow. Light filled the room, and thunder seemed to shake the palace to its foundations. The queen fell to her knees, shielding her child, stammering in fear. "Foolish woman!" Isis's voice boomed, no longer the whisper of a crone but the command of a deity. "I would have given your son eternity. I would have made him a god. But your mortal fear has ruined it. He will live and he will die just like all the rest." Then her fury subsided, replaced by the crushing weight of her own quest. She looked at the pillar, her true purpose revealed. She told the trembling king and queen everything, of her murdered husband, the king of gods, of the treachery of his brother Set, and of the divine cargo sealed within the very pillar that held up their roof. Ashamed of her outburst and terrified of the goddess's power, King Malkandar immediately ordered the pillar to be taken down. Workmen carefully dismantled the hall, and the great tamarisk trunk was laid on the floor. With reverence and precision, they cut away the wood, layer by layer, following the goddess's instructions. And there, nestled in the heartwood, was the ornate chest. Untouched. Perfect. The court backed away as Isis approached it. Her hands trembled as she broke the lead seal. The scent of cedar and myrrh and something else, the faint divine essence of her husband, filled the air. She lifted the heavy lid. Inside lay Osiris. He was not decayed. He was not a corpse. He looked merely asleep, his regal face serene, his powerful body unchanged, cradled in the darkness of the coffin. The long, impossible search was over. She had found him. She threw herself upon the chest, her body racked with sobs not of despair, but of a grief so profound, so full of love and loss, that it was a physical force. She held the cold body of her husband, her tears falling on his silent face, her quest victorious, yet her tragedy complete. He was in her arms again, but he was still gone. But even in the finality of death, a seed of magic remained. This was Isis, the great enchantress, whose power was not just in spells and incantations, but in a love so fierce it could challenge the very laws of creation. She had found him. That was the first impossibility she had overcome. Now she faced the second, death itself. She knew she could not work her magic under the watchful eyes of the court, under the shadow of Set's spies. She needed sanctuary. With the help of her sister Nephthys, who, though married to Set, was loyal to her family and to the order Osiris represented, Isis carried her husband's body away. They traveled under the cover of darkness, seeking refuge in the one place in Egypt where life was so dense, so chaotic and untamed, that it could swallow any secret. The marshlands of the Nile Delta. Here, among the towering papyrus reeds that drank deep from the lifeblood of the river, she laid Osiris to rest. The air was thick with the hum of insects and the croak of frogs. Crocodiles slid silently through the murky water. It was a place of birth and decay, a perfect cradle for a god hovering between two worlds. Isis concealed the cedar chest deep within the green labyrinth, believing that here, surrounded by the primal energy of creation, she could find a way. She could begin the great work of breathing life back into the man who was her husband, her brother and her king. She left him in the care of Nephthys and set off to gather the herbs and artifacts she would need for the most powerful ritual ever to be attempted. But fate, or perhaps chaos, is never so easily cheated. Set, in his restless paranoia, never stopped searching. He ruled, but his throne felt unsteady. He could feel the love for Osiris in the hearts of the people like a silent rebellion. He could feel the power of Isis moving in the world like a current beneath a still surface. He became a hunter, not of animals but of ghosts and shadows. One night, guided by a brilliant full moon, the very same moon that so often symbolized the magic of Isis, Set was hunting boar in the delta. His dogs were agitated, whining and pulling at their leashes, drawn not by the scent of prey, but by something else, something divine, something out of place. He followed them through the reeds, the moonlight casting long dancing shadows that looked like grasping fingers. And then he saw it. Partially hidden by a thicket of papyrus, was the unmistakable form of the magnificent cedar chest. For a moment he froze. It couldn't be. It was impossible. He had sent it to the bottom of the Nile, to be lost in the depths forever. But there it was. Rage, hotter and more violent than the desert sun, flooded his veins. It wasn't just anger at being defied. It was a primal terror. The terror that even in death Osiris was more loved, more powerful, and more present than he, Set, was in life. He realized in that instant that as long as Osiris existed, even as a corpse, he could one day return. The people's hope for his return was a poison to Set's reign. He tore the chest from its hiding place, splintering the fragrant wood with his bare hands. And there, lying peacefully as if only asleep, was the pale, perfect body of his brother. The sight of that serene face, the face that had been adored by all, drove Set into a madness beyond reason. This was the source of all his jealousy, all his insecurity. A single death was not enough. To simply kill him again was pointless. He had to be undone. He had to be erased. In a frenzy of divine violence, Set, the god of chaos, did the unthinkable. He began to dismember the body of his brother. It was an act of ultimate desecration, a violation not just of a king, but of the very concept of order, of the sacred form of a god. With each cut he was trying to destroy a piece of Egypt itself. He severed the head that had held such wisdom. He severed the arms that had governed with such justice. He severed the legs that had walked the land and made it fertile. He did not stop until the once whole king was in 14 pieces, 14 fragments of a shattered god. It was a symbolic annihilation, an attempt to ensure that Osiris could never ever be made whole again. He would not just be dead. He would be scattered, incomplete, a memory broken into so many pieces that it could never be reassembled. His horrific work complete, Set took the 14 pieces of his brother and, in a final act of spite that would curse the entire nation, he scattered them. He hurled them across the length and breadth of Egypt. One piece he threw into the Nile near the capital. Another he flung far to the south, into the lands of Nubia. A third he buried in the western desert. He cast the fragments of the king into the great river, onto its banks, and into the barren sands, ensuring each part was as far from the others as possible. He was not just hiding the body. He was seeding the land with death. He was turning the kingdom of his brother into a vast sprawling tomb. Now he thought it was finally over. Now Osiris was truly gone, reduced to a puzzle with no solution, a story with no end. When Isis returned to the marshes, her arms filled with the magical ingredients she had gathered, a terrible silence greeted her. The air was no longer humming with life. It was still, heavy with violation. She saw the tracks, the signs of a struggle, the splintered remains of the cedar chest lying empty and broken like a desecrated shrine. The body was gone. A despair so deep it threatened to extinguish her own divine light washed over her. She had been so close. She had dared to hope, and that hope had been ripped away, leaving a wound far deeper than the first. She let out a cry of such anguish that the reeds in the marsh wept dew and the river itself seemed to mourn. Had she failed him? Had all her efforts, her perilous journey, her impossible success, been for nothing? For a moment, she was lost in a void of grief. But Isis was not a goddess who surrendered to despair. Her sorrow was a fire, and in that fire, her resolve was forged into something harder than diamond. Set had not just stolen her husband. He had shattered him. He had scattered the dream of Egypt across the wasteland. And in that moment of ultimate loss, her new quest became terrifyingly clear. Her first journey had been to find a body. This new one would be infinitely harder. She had to find a soul in pieces. She had to walk every inch of the kingdom her husband had built and reclaim him, one fragment at a time. She had to walk into the land that was now a graveyard and make it a kingdom once more. And so her long walk began, a pilgrimage of grief. Every step was a testament to her loss, every horizon a reminder of how far she had to go. The world that had once been a garden was now a hunting ground, and she was the prey. Set's influence was everywhere. The winds whispered his name, the shadows seemed to twist into his cruel smirk. Spies and monsters born of his chaotic power lurked in the reeds and the desert sands. For any other being, this would have been a suicide mission. But Isis was not just any being. She was a queen searching for her king, a wife searching for her husband. She was love, incarnate and enraged. As she journeyed into the suffocating darkness of this new Egypt, a figure emerged from the twilight to meet her. It was her sister, Nephthys. Her face was a mask of anguish, her eyes hollowed out by guilt. She was the lady of the house, but her house was now broken. She had been Set's wife, a pawn in his brutal game, and her silence had been a form of betrayal. She fell to her knees before Isis, not as a goddess, but as a sister begging for forgiveness. She confessed her part, the terror that had kept her silent, the shame that now consumed her. She had stood by while the light of the world was extinguished. Isis looked down at her twin, and in her eyes she saw not an enemy, but a mirror of her own pain. She saw another victim of Set's ambition. In that moment of shared sorrow, a bond that had been fractured was reforged in the fires of loss. Isis extended her hand and pulled her sister to her feet. There were no words of forgiveness, for they were not needed. There was only the task ahead. From that moment on, they were not two but one, two wings of the same bird, a kite, soaring on a wind of sorrow, their cries echoing across the desolate land as they searched for their beloved. Together, they began to traverse the kingdom. They followed the lifeblood of the nation, the great river Nile, the very body of their fallen husband. They waded through the thick, muddy swamps of the delta, where crocodiles, ancient and silent, watched them from the water's edge. They walked the scorching banks of the south, where the sun beat down with a fury that felt like Set's own gaze. They asked the river, but it gave no answer. They asked the wind, but it only carried the scent of decay. They asked the children, the old men, the fishermen casting their nets. First, people were afraid. To speak of Osiris was to invite the wrath of the new king. But love for the gentle god ran deeper than fear of the tyrant. A whisper here, pointed finger there. A story from a ferryman who had seen something glinting in the reeds. A tale from a weaver who had found a strange, wrapped object caught in her loom by the riverbank. Piece by piece, the whispers led them. In the city of Memphis, they found a shoulder, carefully laid to rest by a priest who had recognized it for what it was. Near the great quarries of the east, they found a leg half buried in the sand. They traveled to Abydos, a place that would one day become his most sacred site. And there, Hidden in the hollow of a sycamore tree, they found his head. Imagine the moment. Isis, holding the face of her husband. The eyes that had once held the universe were now closed. The lips that had spoken creation into being were silent. She cradled it, her tears falling like the first drops of a coming flood, washing the dust from his noble brow. With each piece they found, the ritual was the same. Nephthys would keen a cry of pure primal grief that could shatter stone, while Isis would use her magic. She would carefully clean the fragment, anointing it with oils and perfumes, wrapping it in clean linen, preserving it against further decay. It was a gruesome, heartbreaking puzzle. 13 times they felt the brief, soaring hope of discovery, only to be plunged back into the reality of their task. They were not resurrecting a god. They were collecting remains. They were groundskeepers in the garden of their own shattered lives. They had traveled the length of Egypt, from the northern sea to the first cataract in the south. They had gathered 13 pieces, 13 fragments of the divine. Her magic had preserved them, kept them whole. But there was one piece missing. The 14th piece. The phallus. The symbol of his fertility. The very source of his power to create life. Without it, Osiris could never be truly whole. Without it, a future heir, a challenger to Set's throne, could never be conceived. They searched with a new desperation. They retraced their steps, questioned everyone they had met, scoured every inch of the riverbank. Finally, a terrified old fisherman confessed what he had seen. In the frenzy of the dismemberment, that final piece had been thrown into the Nile, and one of the river's own creatures, an Oxyrhynchus fish, had devoured it. It was lost. Forever. This was Set's final, most cruel victory. It was a mutilation that transcended death. He hadn't just killed Osiris. He had sought to erase his legacy, to ensure his line would end, to salt the very earth of his memory so that nothing could ever grow again. It was a profound cosmic violation. Any other would have surrendered. The task was impossible. The final piece was not merely lost. It had been consumed, returned to the cycle of nature, unmade. The despair was absolute. It felt as if the darkness had finally truly won. But Set had underestimated one thing. He had calculated the power of a king, the strength of a god, the fear of a populace. He had never calculated the creative, indomitable will of a loving wife. Isis stood on the banks of the Nile, the 13 pieces of her husband behind her, the weight of a broken world on her shoulders, and she did not break. If the world would not return what was taken from her, then she would simply have to create it herself. Her grief was a fire, but her magic was a forge. She would not be denied. She would raise her hands, not in supplication to the heavens, but to channel their power. She would gather the clay of the riverbank, she would whisper the secret names of creation, and she would sculpt that which was lost. She would fashion a new phallus from gold and magic, an instrument not of flesh, but of pure divine will. She had the body, though it was scarred and incomplete. She had the will, forged in the crucible of her grief. And she had her magic, a power greater than any in the land, for it was fueled by a love that death itself could not extinguish. The collection was over. The reconstruction was about to begin. She was no longer just a queen or a widow. She was becoming something more. She was becoming a savior, a magician of unimaginable power, preparing to perform a ritual that would not just mend a broken body, but mend the broken promise of life itself. A ritual that would echo through eternity. In the labyrinthine marshes of the Nile Delta, hidden from the vengeful eyes of Set, the great work began. This was not a pristine temple of polished stone, but a sanctuary of mud and reeds, a place of primal beginnings. Here, under a sky thick with stars that seemed to lean in and listen, Isis, with her sister Nephthys at her side, laid out the 13 pieces of her beloved. It was a gruesome mosaic of a god, a testament to the savagery of a brother's jealousy. Each piece, lovingly cleansed of the river's silt and the stains of his murder, was placed in its rightful position. The arms that had held the crook and flail, the legs that had strode across the fertile earth, the torso that had housed a king's heart. With the help of Anubis, the jackal-headed god who had been born of an affair between Osiris and Nephthys, and Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe of the gods, the ritual commenced. Anubis, with an innate understanding of the passage between life and death, began the sacred process of anointing. Precious oils, myrrh, and frankincense were used to purify the flesh, to prepare it for its impossible journey. Thoth, the master of words, the keeper of sacred knowledge, began to chant the incantations. These were not mere prayers. They were the original words of creation, the very vibrations that had first coaxed order from the chaos of none. Each syllable was a thread, and Isis was weaving them together, stitching her husband's body not just with linen bandages, but with pure magic. She leaned close, her own tears mixing with the sacred oils, and whispered promises to the lifeless form. She spoke of their love, of the world he had built, of the justice that was owed. Her voice was a spell in itself, a current of unwavering devotion that charged the humid air. The flesh began to knit. Severed veins found their partners, shattered bones fused, and torn muscle mended itself under her magical touch. Before her, the dismembered king was becoming whole again, a perfect, beautiful statue of the man he once was. But he was still just that, a statue, a cold, silent vessel. The spark of life, the divine fire that had animated him, was gone. And then a moment of crushing despair. A realization that struck Isis with the force of a physical blow. They had found 13 pieces, but Osiris had been torn into 14. The final, most vital piece, his phallus, the symbol of his fertility, his power to create life, was missing. Set, in his ultimate act of desecration, had thrown it into the Nile, where it had been devoured by an Oxyrhynchus fish. He had not just sought to kill his brother. He had sought to erase his bloodline, to ensure no heir could ever rise to challenge his stolen throne. The line of Osiris was meant to end here, in a reassembled but incomplete body, a king rendered impotent for all eternity. For any other being, this would have been the end. The ritual would have failed. The hope of Egypt would have died in those swamps. But Isis was no longer just a grieving wife. She was a vessel of divine will, a magician whose power was fueled by a love that transcended the boundaries of death itself. She would not be denied. If the world would not return what was stolen, she would create it anew. Gathering clay from the riverbank and infusing it with her potent magic, she fashioned a replacement, a phallus of gold and power, more perfect than the one of flesh it replaced. She attached it to his body, completing the form, refusing to let Set have the final cruel victory. Now the vessel was complete, perfect, whole. But the question remained: how do you breathe life into a statue of flesh? How do you reignite a star that has gone out? Isis knew the answer lay not in words alone, but in an act of profound transformation. She called upon the deepest magic within her, the magic of creation itself, and her form began to shift. Her arms elongated into feathered wings, her body streamlined, and her eyes became the piercing gaze of a raptor. She became a kite, a sacred bird of prey, a symbol of mourning and resurrection. She rose into the air above her husband's body. The air grew still. The buzzing of insects ceased. The very stars seemed to hold their breath. Then she began to beat her wings. Slowly at first, then with gathering speed and power. But this was no ordinary wind she created. With each powerful downstroke, her wings did not just move the air. They fanned the last dying embers of Osiris's life force. She was breathing magic into him. The air that flowed over his skin was the Ankh, the very essence of life, a divine breath that she, a goddess, was bestowing upon a god. She hovered over his mouth, her wings beating a frantic, life-giving rhythm, and she breathed her magic directly into his lungs. And his chest rose, a single shuddering breath. His fingers twitched, a flicker of movement behind his eyelids. The golden skin, once cold and still as marble, began to warm. The blood, stagnant in his veins, began to flow once more, nudged into motion by a heart that beat with a magical pulse. Osiris, the murdered king, the broken god, opened his eyes. He was alive, but he was not the same. This was not a true return to the world of the living. He was a being sustained by a spell, a man held together by a wife's love and a goddess's power. He could not walk again in the sunlit lands of Egypt. His time there was over. He was the first mummy, a bridge between what is and what comes after. He was now a king of a different realm, the silent, shadowy kingdom of the dead. But they had this one moment, a brief, stolen reunion in the secret heart of the marshlands, a magical night where life and death embraced. And in this embrace, the ultimate purpose of the ritual was fulfilled. The golden phallus, crafted by Isis's magic, served its purpose. She conceived a child, an heir, a son born not of flesh, but of magic and vengeance, conceived by a living goddess and a resurrected god. In that moment, a new destiny was forged. As the first light of dawn threatened the horizon, Osiris's form began to fade. His duty was done. He had to depart for his new kingdom, the Duat, the underworld, where he would reign as the just and merciful lord of the afterlife. He left his wife, but he did not leave her alone. He left her with a promise. He left her with a son who would be named Horus, and who would grow to become the storm that would one day break upon the throne of the usurper Set. The great war of the gods was not over. It had just truly begun. In the vast, whispering reed beds of the Nile Delta, a secret was kept. A cradle, not of gold but of papyrus and mud, was hidden deep within the chemist's marshes. Here, in the shadowy labyrinth where the water met the land, the goddess Isis raised her son. This was no palace for a prince. It was a fugitive's den. Every rustle of the reeds could be an assassin. Every shadow on the water could be a predator sent by the watchful eye of the new king, the murderer Set. Scorpions, the children of the desert god, scuttled through the mud. Snakes, his silent agents, coiled in the warm sun. Crocodiles, the ancient terrors of the river, slid unseen beneath the surface. The entire world, it seemed, had become Set's personal hunting ground, and the prey was a single helpless child. But this was no ordinary child. This was Horus, son of Osiris, the rightful heir to the throne of all creation. And his mother was no ordinary woman. She was Isis, the goddess of magic, whose love was a shield more powerful than any fortress wall. Day after day, she would leave her son hidden, camouflaged amongst the reeds, while she foraged for food, her divine form disguised as a humble mortal. She would beg for scraps from villagers, her heart a cold knot of fear, always looking over her shoulder, always listening for the whisper of a threat. Every moment away from him was an eternity of agony. How do you hide a god? How do you silence a destiny that was meant to be shouted from the heavens? One fateful evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Isis returned to their hidden alcove. But she was not met with the happy gurgle of her infant son. She was met with a chilling silence. He lay on his back, his small body limp, his face a pale blue. A faint, dark mark on his skin told the story. A scorpion's sting. It was a venomous whisper from the shadows, a message directly from Set. A message that said, Asterisk, there is nowhere you can hide. There is no hope you can keep. Asterisk. A cry tore from Isis's throat, a sound of pure, undiluted despair that silenced the marsh. It was the sound of a universe breaking. She gathered her lifeless son into her arms, her tears falling on his still chest. She pleaded with the local villagers, with the wise women, but their mortal remedies were useless against a god's poison. This was divine malice, a magic too dark and ancient for them to comprehend. Desperation turned to rage, a rage that burned with the heat of 1,000 suns. Isis, the grieving mother, the hunted queen, stood in the heart of the swamp and unleashed the full terrifying extent of her power. She looked to the sky, where the great sun barge of Ra was making its nightly journey into the underworld, and with a single focused act of will, she commanded it to stop. Imagine it, the very engine of creation, the source of all light and life, frozen in the sky. Time itself held its breath. The stars ceased their wheeling dance. The winds died. The world was plunged into a sudden, unnatural twilight. The gods aboard the barge were thrown into chaos. What force could possibly halt the progress of Ra himself? Down on the mortal plane, Isis had her answer ready. She shouted into the silent heavens, her voice echoing across the paralyzed cosmos. She would not allow the sun to set. She would not allow a new day to dawn. She would hold all of creation hostage, trapped in an eternal twilight, until her son was saved. She was a mother, and her love was now a weapon aimed at the heart of reality. Her desperate gambit worked. From the heavens a figure descended. It was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, of knowledge, and of magic more powerful than any other. He had heard her cry and seen her cosmic defiance. He approached the grieving goddess, his presence a calming balm on her fiery rage. He looked upon the still form of Horus and knew that this was more than just a child's death. This was the death of hope, the death of balance. Thoth, the great scribe of the gods, began to recite a powerful incantation, a spell of such profound magic that it could rewrite what was written. He spoke the secret names of the poison, commanding it to release its hold. He invoked the power of Ra, still held captive in the sky, and channeled its life-giving energy into the boy. As Thoth's words washed over him, a faint warmth returned to Horus's skin. The blue tinge receded from his lips. His chest hitched, then took a single shuddering breath. The venom, the very essence of Set's hatred, was purged, turned to nothingness by a magic far older and deeper. As Horus's eyes fluttered open, the spell on the sun was released. The barge of Ra resumed its journey, and the natural order of the cosmos was restored. But something had fundamentally changed. The child who woke up was not the same one who had fallen. The poison had been a crucible, and he had been forged anew in its fire. From that day forward, Horus grew with unnatural speed and strength. The marshes were no longer just a hiding place, they became his training ground. He learned the ways of the hunter, the warrior. He learned to move as silently as the snake, to strike as swiftly as the falcon. Isis, no longer just a protector, became his teacher. She filled his mind not with children's stories, but with the epic of his father Osiris. He learned of the golden age his father had built, a kingdom of peace and abundance. He learned of the jealous rage that festered in his uncle's heart. And he learned, in brutal, vivid detail, of the betrayal, the silver coffin, the dismemberment, the desperate search. He felt his mother's sorrow as if it were his own. He felt his father's stolen life crying out from the underworld. The story was not a history lesson. It was a weapon being honed. It was the fuel for a fire that was beginning to burn in his soul, a fire called vengeance. Years passed in this secret world. The boy became a man, or rather, a god in his full power. His body was strong, his mind was sharp, and his eyes burned with a singular divine purpose. He was no longer the hidden heir. He was the coming storm. He was the incarnation of righteous fury. The day finally came when he was ready. He looked out from the edge of the swamp, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, towards the heart of the kingdom that was his birthright. He left the safety of the marshes behind forever. He strode, not as a fugitive, but as a king returning from exile. His destination, the great celestial court of the gods, where Ra himself presided over the Ennead, the council of the most powerful deities. He walked into the grand hall, and a hush fell over the divine assembly. They saw not a child of the swamp, but a god of immense power. They saw the falcon head, the symbol of kingship. They saw the eyes of his father Osiris, and the fire of his mother Isis. And there, sitting on the throne of Egypt, was Set. The usurper king looked down, his expression a mixture of shock, contempt, and a flicker of something long forgotten fear. Horus did not draw a weapon. He did not shout or make threats. He simply stood before the assembled gods, his voice clear and steady, ringing with an authority that had been denied for far too long. He spoke the words that would ignite the heavens and shake the very foundations of the world. He laid his formal claim. He demanded the return of his father's throne. He demanded justice for murder. He challenged Set, not to a battle of might, but to a trial before the gods. The gauntlet had been thrown. The two great forces ordering chaos, light and darkness, nephew and uncle, now stood face to face. The divine court was in session, and the war for the fate of all creation was about to enter its most brutal chapter. The great Ennead, the 9 primordial gods, sat in judgment. At their head was Ra, the sun god, ancient and weary of this endless squabble. Set, the god of chaos, stood tall, his voice a gravelly boom that shook the pillars of the celestial hall. He made his case with brutal simplicity. He was the stronger. He was the more experienced. He had the power to protect the sunboat on its nightly journey through the underworld, a task that required merciless strength. Horus, he argued, was a mere boy, a child still smelling of his mother's milk, unfit to command the respect of gods or mortals. The throne belonged to the one who could hold it, and he, Set, was that one. Then Horus, with Isis standing behind him, her presence a silent, unyielding pillar of support, made his own claim. It was not a claim of strength but of right, of lineage, of Ma'at. He was the son of Osiris, the rightful heir. The throne was his by divine inheritance, a sacred trust passed from father to son since the dawn of time. To deny him was to deny the very order of the cosmos, to spit in the face of tradition and legitimacy. The gods were divided. Some, the more pragmatic and aggressive deities, sided with Set. Strength, they muttered, was its own justification. Others, led by the wise and just Thoth, god of knowledge, argued for Horus. The law, they insisted, must be upheld, or they were no better than the chaos they sought to control. Ra, indecisive, proposed a solution: a contest. A series of trials to prove once and for all who was more worthy. The first challenge was a race. But this was no ordinary race. They were to build boats of stone and sail them down the Nile. The first to finish would win the gods' favor. Set, ever the literalist, laughed. A boat of stone, a perfect test of his monumental strength. He went to the mountains and tore a massive peak from its foundations, carving it into a colossal barge. It was a masterpiece of raw power, a testament to his might. He launched it with a triumphant roar, certain of his victory. But Horus was his mother's son. He was a creature of intellect as much as divine fury. He knew he could never outmuscle Set, so he outthought him. He fashioned a beautiful boat from pine wood. But then, using his magic, he coated it in a layer of plaster that looked exactly like granite. It was a perfect imitation of a stone vessel. When the race began, Set's mighty stone boat, impossibly heavy, sank like a stone, plunging to the bottom of the Nile. Horus, in his light, disguised vessel, sailed gracefully past, crossing the finish line to the astonishment of the assembled gods. Enraged at being tricked, Set's fury was a physical thing, a storm gathering on the horizon. He would not be outsmarted by a boy. He transformed himself into a hippopotamus, a creature of immense destructive power, and plunged into the river, capsizing Horus's boat and attacking him in the churning water. Not to be outdone, Horus too took the form of a hippo, and the two divine beasts tore at each other in the depths of the Nile, their battle turning the sacred river red. Watching from the riverbank, Isis could not bear to see her son in such peril. She fashioned a magical harpoon, a spear of copper, and hurled it into the fray. But in the chaos of the battle, her aim was untrue. Her harpoon struck not Set, but her own son, Horus. He cried out in agony, his divine voice a shriek of pain and betrayal. Horrified, Isis used her magic to withdraw the spear, and in that moment of hesitation, she heard the voice of Set. He was her brother after all. He pleaded with her. "What have I done to you, my sister, that you would hunt me so?" For a split second, her heart softened, and she lowered her weapon. Seeing this, Horus was overcome with a blinding youthful rage. His own mother, siding with his father's murderer. He leaped from the water, his fury making him a giant, and with a single stroke of a bronze knife, he sliced off his mother's head. The gods gasped in horror. This was an act beyond the pale, a matricide that stained his very soul. Isis, a goddess, did not die, but her headless form collapsed. Thoth, ever the healer, quickly intervened, using his magic to place the head of a cow upon her shoulders, transforming her into the goddess we often see as Hathor. But the damage was done. Horus, the champion of order, had committed an act of pure chaos. He fled into the desert, shamed and furious, and tore out his own eyes in despair. Set found him there, blinded and helpless at the foot of a mountain. And here Set saw his ultimate opportunity. It was not enough to defeat Horus in a contest. It was not enough to kill him. He had to utterly humiliate him, to prove to the gods that Horus was fundamentally unfit to rule, not a king but a subordinate. In the ancient world, the ultimate act of domination was a sexual one. Set overpowered the blinded Horus, committing an act meant to mark him as the lesser, the receptive, the one who is taken, not the one who takes. It was a violation designed to shatter his claim to the masculine dominant role of a king. Set returned to the divine court, ready to expose Horus's shame. "Summon Horus," he declared, "and I will show you all why he can never be king." But Set had underestimated one crucial player: Isis. Her anger at her son had faded, replaced by the fierce, calculating love of a mother. She had found Horus in the desert, and he had told her everything. Her mind, a weapon far sharper than any spear, formulated a plan of exquisite revenge. She collected the seed of Set from Horus's body. Then she went to her garden and instructed Horus to pleasure himself into a pot of her finest lettuce, Set's favorite food. That evening, Set came to her garden, boasting of his triumph. Isis, playing the part of the gracious host, offered him the fresh, crisp lettuce. Unsuspecting, the god of chaos devoured it, and with it, the seed of Horus. The trap was set. Back in the divine court, Set made his grand accusation. "Let the seed of the gods be summoned," he cried out to Thoth. "Let us see from where it answers." Thoth called upon the divine seed, and all the gods listened. A faint voice answered from the swamp. It was the seed of Set, which Isis had discarded there. Set was confused. Then Thoth called again. "Let the seed of Horus answer." And this time a voice clear and strong came from within Set himself. Suddenly, a brilliant golden sun disk erupted from the top of Set's own head. It was the divine essence of Horus, the seed of a king, emerging from the brow of his rival. The gods stared, first in stunned silence, then in dawning comprehension. Set had not dominated Horus. In a way none of them could have imagined, Horus had dominated him. He had been tricked, defiled, and his ultimate act of violation had been turned into his ultimate public humiliation. He, the great and powerful Set, had been made to birth the proof of his opponent's royal power. The chamber erupted. Set, the god of brute force, stood shamed and speechless. Horus, his eyes now healed by the magic of Thoth, stood tall, his claim no longer just one of birthright, but one of cunning and resilience. He had been to the lowest depths of despair and emerged, not just victorious but purer, stronger. It was a devastating blow to the god of chaos. But the war was not over. Set was humiliated, but he was not defeated. And a cornered god, especially the god of chaos, is the most dangerous force in all of creation. His rage was no longer just for the throne. It was now a blood feud, a burning need for vengeance that threatened to consume them all. Set's retreat was not a surrender. It was a regrouping. In the desolate quiet of the Red Desert, his fury cooled, crystallizing into something far more terrifying. A plan. He had tried to win through brute strength, through monstrous transformations. He had failed. Now, he would attack Horus not just as a warrior but as a concept. He would dismantle the very idea of Horus's legitimacy, proving him unfit to rule, not by killing him, but by utterly humiliating him. The war for the throne of Egypt would now be fought in the courtroom of the gods. A series of trials and contests designed to expose weakness and crown a victor through divine judgment. The great Ennead, the council of the most powerful gods, gathered. The air crackled with tension. On one side stood Horus, his youthful face set with determination, the rightful heir by blood. On the other, Set, his presence a vortex of chaotic energy, the powerful incumbent, the brother of the slain king. Ra, the sun god, still presided, but even his authority was strained by the sheer bitterness of the feud. He proposed a contest, something to settle this once and for all. A race. But not just any race. They would each build a boat of stone and sail it down the Nile. The winner would be declared king. Set laughed. A boat of stone? This was a contest of pure power, of bending the unbendable to one's will. It was a challenge made for him. He went to the mountains and, with his thunderous strength, carved a massive barge from a single peak. It was a monument to his might, heavy, imposing, and utterly unsinkable in his mind. He launched it into the Nile with a triumphant roar, certain of his victory. But Horus was his mother's son. He had inherited not just his father's nobility, but Isis's cunning. He knew he could not match his uncle's raw power, so he didn't try. Instead, he went to the forest and felled a mighty pine tree. He fashioned a beautiful boat from its wood, sleek and fast. Then, he did something brilliant. He covered it in a layer of plaster and painted it to perfectly resemble granite. It looked identical to a boat carved from stone, but it was light, agile, and most importantly buoyant. When the race began, Set powered his stone behemoth forward with sheer force, churning the Nile into a froth. He looked back, expecting to see Horus struggling to even move his own stone vessel. Instead, he saw his nephew gliding effortlessly past him. In a fit of rage and disbelief, Set looked down at his own boat. It was sinking. The immense weight that he thought was his advantage was now his anchor, dragging him down to the muddy riverbed. Horus sailed past the finish line, the victor. The gods applauded Horus's cleverness, but the contest wasn't over. Set, emerging from the river sputtering with mud and fury, demanded another trial. He would not be outsmarted by a boy. He proposed a new challenge, one of endurance and transformation. They would both change into hippopotamuses and submerge themselves in the Nile. The first one to surface for air in 3 months would forfeit the throne. They plunged into the water, their divine forms shifting into the massive, powerful beasts of the river. Days turned into weeks. The water grew still. From the riverbank, Isis watched, her heart torn. She saw her son Horus struggling, but she also saw her brother Set, the murderer of her husband. Her mind was a tempest of conflicting loyalties. Fearing for her son's life, she forged a magical harpoon, intending to strike Set and force him to the surface. She cast it once but struck Horus by mistake. He surfaced, roaring in pain and betrayal, his skin pierced by his own mother's weapon. Horrified, Isis healed him with a touch and a spell, and cast the harpoon again. This time it found its mark, embedding itself deep in Set's flank. He roared in agony, a sound that shook the foundations of the earth, and cried out, "Isis, my sister, why do you persecute me? Am I not of the same mother as you?" His plea, born of genuine pain, struck a chord in Isis's heart. He was still her brother. Overwhelmed by a sudden tragic pity, she commanded the harpoon to release him. Horus exploded from the water, incandescent with rage. Not at Set, but at his mother. "How could you?" he screamed, his voice cracking with fury and hurt. "After everything he has done, you show him mercy?" In a moment of uncontrollable fury, a rage so profound it mirrored his uncle's, he lunged at Isis and with a single swift motion sliced off her head. The universe held its breath. The sun had struck down the mother. Thoth, the god of wisdom, seeing this abomination, acted instantly. He replaced Isis's head with that of a cow, saving her life but marking the moment of this terrible transgression. Horus, ashamed and horrified by his own actions, fled into the desert to be alone with his guilt. Set saw his opportunity. He found Horus asleep in an oasis, exhausted and vulnerable. This was his chance to end it, but killing him was no longer enough. He needed to defile him, to prove his dominance in the most absolute and degrading way. He assaulted the sleeping god, believing he had subjugated Horus, marking him as the inferior, the one who is taken, not the one who takes. In the politics of the gods, this was a checkmate. A dominated god could never rule. But Horus had not been entirely asleep. He had been feigning, and as Set committed his vile act, Horus caught his uncle's essence in his hand, hidden from sight. He ran back to his mother, Isis, who, despite his horrific attack, saw only her child in need of her help. When Horus showed her what he held, she understood Set's plan immediately. A new desperate scheme formed in her mind. She cut off her son's defiled hand, threw it in the swamp, and magically grew him a new one. Then she collected Horus's own divine essence and went to Set's garden. She knew his favorite food was wild lettuce. She spread Horus's essence over the crisp leaves, a hidden poison of legitimacy. Later that day, Set, arrogant and sure of his victory, ate the lettuce with relish. He then called the divine council together for a final judgment. He stood before them and declared, "Give the throne to me, for I have performed the work of a male against Horus." He claimed Horus was now unfit, proven to be the submissive party. The gods were in an uproar. But Thoth, ever the voice of reason, called for the divine essences to speak for themselves, to declare where they were. He called out to the essence of Set, and a faint voice answered from the marshes, where Horus's severed hand had been thrown. It had failed to enter Horus. Then Thoth called out to the essence of Horus, and to the utter shock of the entire assembly, a voice answered from within Set's own body. A shining golden disk, the seed of a king, erupted from Set's forehead. Set was horrified. He had been tricked, humiliated. His own strategy of defilement turned against him. He had not dominated Horus. Horus had, by cunning and magic, dominated him. Horus's claim to the throne was now stronger than ever. But Set's rage was now a pure black fire beyond all reason. If he could not win by strength or by cunning or by degradation, he would win by pure savage violence. He lunged at Horus not as a contestant but as a predator. He clawed at his nephew's face, his fingers finding their mark. With a terrible sickening tear, he ripped out Horus's left eye. The eye, a celestial body representing the moon, was crushed in his fist, its light extinguished. Horus screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the cosmos, and fell into darkness. Set had taken the moon from the sky. He had plunged half of creation into blackness, just to wound his enemy. The gods looked on in horror. This feud had gone too far. It was no longer a contest for a throne. It was a wound in the fabric of reality itself. Thoth rushed to the fallen Horus. He gathered the shattered pieces of the lunar eye, all 64 of them. With his profound wisdom and magic, he painstakingly reassembled them, breathing on the eye to restore its light and life. The eye that Thoth returned to Horus was now more than just an eye. It was the Wadjet, the whole one, a symbol of healing, of restoration, of protection against all evil. Horus could see again, but the world he now saw was different. The innocence of his youth was gone, burned away by betrayal and pain. This brutal war had forged him into something new. But even with his sight restored, the throne was not his. The final judgment had not yet been passed, and Set, though humiliated, was far from defeated. The cosmic scale remained unbalanced, and the gods knew that this cycle of violence, if left unchecked, would tear their world apart. A final binding verdict had to be rendered, before there was nothing left to rule. The great Ennead, the council of the most powerful gods, gathered for the last time. The air in the celestial court crackled with an exhaustion 80 years in the making. The endless cycle of contests, tricks, and brutal confrontations had worn down the very fabric of the cosmos. This was not merely a dispute over inheritance. It was a schism at the heart of creation. On one side stood Horus, his divine form now that of a mature, powerful god, his eyes burning with a righteous fire that had been forged in loss and betrayal. On the other was Set, the lord of chaos, unbowed and defiant, his red-rimmed eyes scanning the assembled gods, searching for weakness, for any lingering doubt he could exploit. The final arguments began. Set spoke first, his voice a low growl that rumbled like a desert sandstorm. He did not plead for mercy or apologize for his actions. He argued from a position of brutal pragmatism. He was strength. He was power. He pointed to the horizon, to the daily journey of the sun god Ra across the sky. Every night, Ra's solar barge was attacked by the great serpent of chaos, Apep, a creature of absolute oblivion, and who stood at the prow of that boat, spear in hand, defending the sun itself from being extinguished. It was Set. He alone had the raw, untamed might to repel the ultimate darkness. Could a mere boy like Horus do the same? He sneered, calling Horus a child still smelling of his mother's milk, unfit to rule, unable to protect the divine order from its greatest existential threat. To give him the throne would be to invite annihilation. Then Horus spoke. His voice was not the roar of a storm, but the clear, resonant sound of a striking bell, the sound of truth. He did not speak of his own strength, but of Ma'at, the fundamental principle of cosmic order, justice, and truth. The throne was not a prize to be won by the strongest. It was a sacred legacy, passed from father to son. Set had gained his power through murder and usurpation, by tearing a hole in the heart of the divine family. To reward him with the throne would be to declare that treachery was stronger than lineage, that chaos was superior to order. It would be an endorsement of the very darkness Set claimed to fight. He, Horus, was the living embodiment of rightful succession. To deny him was to deny Ma'at itself, and to doom the universe to a foundation of lies. The gods were hopelessly divided. Shu, the god of the air, and Geb, the god of the earth, sided with Horus, honoring the line of succession. But Ra, the ancient sun god, was deeply troubled. He had seen Set's strength firsthand on his nightly journey. He knew the terrifying power of Apep. Set's argument was compelling. The survival of the sun was a matter of pure, unadulterated power, not legal principle. The council was deadlocked, trapped between the pillar of justice and the pillar of survival. For 80 years they had been unable to resolve this paradox, and the world had suffered for it. It was then that Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, knowledge, and judgment, stepped forward. His voice was calm, a soothing balm on the frayed nerves of the assembly. He declared that their earthly perspective was limited. They were arguing about the legacy of a king who was not present. There was only one being whose opinion truly mattered, whose right had been stolen, and whose will was paramount. They had tried every contest, every trial, every debate among themselves. Now they must do the unthinkable. They must ask the victim. They must write a letter to Osiris, king of the underworld. A stunned silence fell over the court. To commune with the dead was a profound and dangerous act, even for the gods. But they knew Thoth was right. This was the only path left. Thoth, the divine scribe, took out his palette and a fresh roll of papyrus. He wrote a simple, direct letter, asking the king of the dead for his judgment. Who should inherit the throne of the living? The letter was dispatched, carried by a messenger to the shadowy gates of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. The gods waited. For the first time in 80 years there was no arguing, no fighting. There was only a vast, silent, and anxious anticipation. The fate of the world hung on a message from beyond the veil of life and death. Then a reply came. It did not arrive on papyrus. It rose from the ground like a chilling vapor, a voice filled with the cold authority of the grave and the righteous fury of a murdered king. It was the voice of Osiris. He did not offer a lengthy legal opinion. He asked two simple, devastating questions that shattered the stalemate forever. First, why has my son Horus not been placed upon my throne? And then, as the gods recoiled from the sheer force of his anger, he followed with a terrifying threat. Are all of you greater than I? Remember that I am the master of the barley and the wheat. No god or goddess can live without it. He was reminding them that he was not just the king of the dead. He was the source of all life and fertility that springs from the earth. He controlled the sustenance of the very gods who presumed to judge his legacy. And then came his final chilling promise. If justice was not immediately served, he would unleash his terrifying messengers, the grim demonic denizens of the Duat, upon the world of the living. He would send them to the celestial realm itself, to drag the gods down into his shadowy kingdom. He reminded Ra, the great sun god, that even the sun must set. Every god, no matter how powerful, would one day enter his domain and face his judgment. The threat was absolute. The authority was undeniable. The debate was over. The gods of the Ennead, humbled and awestruck, reached a unanimous verdict. Geb, the god of the earth and father of Osiris, declared that Horus was the one true king. The crown of Egypt was placed upon his head. As the white and red crowns were unified on his brow, his wounded eye was magically and completely restored by Thoth. It became whole, perfect, and powerful. The Wadjet, the eye of Horus, no longer a symbol of his injury, but a symbol of healing, restoration, protection, and divine perception. He was Horus the unifier, the rightful heir, the living embodiment of Ma'at made manifest. And what of Set? He was not destroyed. The gods, in their restored wisdom, understood that chaos could not be annihilated. To destroy Set would be to destroy the very concept of strength, of ambition, of the untamed wildness that is also a part of creation. Order cannot exist without chaos to define its boundaries. So Set was given a new purpose. His dominion was officially designated as the harsh red deserts, the foreign lands, and the violent storms, all the chaotic places beyond the fertile, ordered banks of the Nile. And his greatest strength was harnessed for the good of all. He was formally charged with the sacred duty he had boasted of. For all eternity, he would stand on the prow of Ra's solar barge, his mighty spear in hand, forever defending the light against the darkness of Apep. His violent, chaotic nature was not erased, but integrated into the cosmic order, given a vital and eternal purpose. The great enemy of the gods became their necessary protector. And so, the creation myth of ancient Egypt concludes. But it is so much more than a story of warring gods. It is the foundational charter for an entire civilization. In this final verdict, the universe is finally set right. Horus, the victorious sun, becomes the model for every pharaoh who would ever rule Egypt. The pharaoh was not just a king. He was the living Horus on earth, the guarantor of Ma'at, the bridge between the human and the divine. The eternal struggle between Horus and Set became the explanation for the daily struggle of life itself. The ordered, fertile black land of the Nile Valley against the chaotic, sterile red land of the desert. The story of Osiris's death and resurrection offered every Egyptian the promise of an afterlife, a belief that justice would ultimately prevail, even after death. The entire cosmos, from the rising of the sun to the flooding of the Nile to the authority of the king, was explained and justified by this epic, sprawling, and deeply human tale. It is a story that reveals a profound truth about our own existence. That creation is not a single event, but an ongoing process. It is a constant, difficult, and necessary struggle to forge order from chaos, to find justice in a world of violence, and to create light in the face of darkness. The gods of Egypt may no longer be worshipped, but the cosmic battle they fought, and the order they established, resonates to this day, a timeless echo of humanity's eternal quest for meaning.